Look at me. So let's just give it a second.
Mhm.
Mute that stream. And this is some of the stuff too that I'm actually looking at for myself down the line. All right. There are beautiful faces. Well, one beautiful face at least. So,
Yours.
uh, let, let me see where'd that go. Type that in there. Okay. So, beautiful. There we go. And the other thing I'll tell you is I will share this with you then after we are done today, to where if you want to revisit it, it's just as much your use of content as it is mine. So
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm available. I'm
Beautiful.
free to you for that. Because I mean, if you think about it, it's one of those things where I mean, you can use it because you're already spending the time. But then also, I mean, if you're going to use it, then the podcast's name is going to continue to get out there. So by all means, go
Yeah,
ahead and use
exactly.
it up.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, all right. To anybody listening, this is that little professional moment where I tell you welcome in, and we have somebody new here with us today. But behind the scenes here, another guest with us, Aaron Gilmore, a buddy of mine. Again, another guy I met in the digital space and hope to one day meet in real life. But another football fan, and actually, I had to put him on hold before we got to this moment. But he's about to tell us a little about his Tom Brady idolatry. So his love and passion for Tom Brady. And anybody who has listened, I think it was episode 12, I did an episode about the top 5 reasons why there's no such thing as the GOAT. So
Mm. I mean, antithesis of that. Got it. Nice prep time there.
so you have to go check that. That'll be your homework before the official recording for you to go listen to that so you can give some rebuttal if you have any.
Yeah, but you realize that for one paragraph of an argument, I usually end up with 5 pages of a rebuttal for that one point.
Yes, and the desire for these episodes is to be an hour at max. So yeah,
Unlimited.
we might have to hesitate a little on that front, but
Yes, yes. Well, I can write an article. I'll just send you a letter. It'll be a little triplicate format.
attached in the show notes.
Attached to the show. Yeah. No, so I thought a lot about this actually because one of the things that one of the things I noticed. So yeah, I do have not an idolization, but I do have an admiration. I think I think we joke around with idolization, but yeah, that would be a serious problem
Oh
at
yeah,
least
oh yeah.
from my worldview. Yeah, but no, as far as Tom Brady, there is an admiration that has recently been declining in certain areas, but I'll explain why here in a minute. And it has nothing to do with his character on the field because on the field I will be one of those that would probably disagree with you. Yes, there is a goat, but it's not because of his ability to play or not to play. Actually, I think that one of the things that made Tom Brady so great was because he was able to take sacrifices for the purpose of getting the right people on the field. I mean, there were multiple years he took pay cuts in order to get the right person into the team, and he made a lot of sacrifices there. He's one of the only quarterbacks that I'm aware of anyway that was so confident in the pocket because he trusted his offensive line to guard him in the pocket. That now there have been obviously many different greats that have done the same thing, but when you take all of these different attributes, all these different parts of his character on the field, I think, yeah, he is one of the greatest. I'm not going to say the greatest, but he's one of the greatest of all time. He's broken numerous records, but a lot of those records have been broken simply because he's of this new generation where instead of 12 games, there's 16 games. And so there's arguments to be made that, look, the only reason why he's so good, the only reason why he's had, what, 7, 8 different NFL records broken is really because he's part of this new generation. So there's an argument to be made there. But as I mentioned, that my admiration is kind of dwindling a little bit because of his recent character off the field.
Mhm.
Um, so I can't say that I disagree to some extent from what I would assume is probably in your article or in your presentation about why there's no goat. but but when he in my opinion I've read a lot about this and I'm really disappointed with this, but when he decided that football was more important than his family, that's to me that's starting. Okay, hold on, wait a minute, dude. And there's a lot to be said, and as we'll probably talk about in the actual episode itself. There's a lot to be said about that issue. because that suggests that he thinks his glory days. I mean, think about it. You're talking about a guy that's going to have his commentary. He's going to be a commentator for the NFL. He's
Yeah.
never not going to be talking about football. He's always so he's set for life. He'll be talking about the glory days, and he'll be talking about football. His entire life will still be football, and yet he's it's almost as if he's trying to deny that part of him, because the glory days to him is on the field.
Hmm.
And to the point where he's willing to. There was an article by the Sun back in September. It was September 13th. There's an article that was talking about how the most important things to Tom Brady, according to Tom Brady, was football and family. And that was only a few months ago.
Mm.
And now all of a sudden it's football. And then you notice that when his family, when he had his divorce with Giselle, and now his three kids are no longer, he doesn't have full custody and so on. And there's obviously some legal issues there. The first three games right after that, he even admitted it. He's like, the reason why I was horrible, he lost the first three games since what? I think 2006. He's never lost three games in a row like that for a long time. And he admitted the reason why I lost these games is my personal life got involved. It got because again, if family is so important to him, it would be one of his greatest weaknesses to lose them. So the only thing he has left as far as his identity would be football on the field. And so it's sort of like an identity crisis he's dealing with. And it kind of got me thinking about how that relates to us as regular human beings, outside of football, and for Christians, for non-Christians, for where we tend to identify with what we do. I was talking with a friend about this yesterday. When we say, "Well, who are you?" Usually people answer with what they do.
Yeah.
Well, who are you? Well, I'm an architect, or I didn't ask you what you did. What are you? Who are you? Define. And for a Christian anyway, it's not who are you, but whose are you?
Hmm.
So the question kind of changes a little bit. So your identity is not found in, who you are, because if I were to define that, it'd be a mess. But instead, as a Christian, no, my identity is found in someone greater. So while I am unworthy, I'm found worthy. While I'm a sinner, I'm found righteous. And this juxtaposition paradox, as a Christian, is that's who I am. That at least here on the field of life, if so to speak. So when I watch Tom Brady go through this situation, there's obviously you're going to hear a lot of commentators that tell you that he's the greatest and now he's the worst, or they cheated, or they don't. And there's a lot of the conversation is just surface deep.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But and maybe I'm psychoanalyzing him a little too deep, but I think he's going through an identity crisis, and the fact that he had to choose between his two greatest important parts of his life. He's struggling, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's a place where, I mean, I know you as a husband and as a dad, myself as a husband and a dad, man, to think about being in that place. That's one of the reasons why I love taking time to actually process and think through stuff like this, is because I deal with the same stuff. Like I may not be a quarterback in the NFL, or arguably one of the greatest to ever play the game, but I still am a dad, a father, somebody who's doing different things with work, and different things with community, and different things with all these other passions and the things that I enjoy, and they all have to be balanced, and they all have to work together to make sure that the important things are the important things, and the things that need to be taken care of are taken care of. And so,
Right.
I think a lot of what you're saying is definitely good meat. It's good stuff. And I definitely want us to be able to flesh some of that out in
Yeah.
in our conversation, definitely. Because I think that's more of where our conversation is going to be anyway, based on our previous conversations. Is
Yes.
you're not as much a Buccaneers fan, you're not as much a Patriots fan, but
No.
you've been, when it's come to football, you've been a Tom Brady fan, and
Yeah.
one
And
of the
I just follow him where he goes.
yeah, and so one of the nice things about that is it gives us a different perspective, because both of all three of the people I've already talked with in previous episodes are a fan of a team, a fan of a team, a fan of a team, and they don't have a correlation with a specific player.
Right.
Um,
Well, so there is some attachment to the Patriots because of nostalgic reasons, but and I really did enjoy the fact that Bruce Arians gave Tom Brady a chance that Belichick did not give him, because they're just two different coaching methodologies. But you're right. It's more of a player than it is a
mhm.
team for me.
Yeah, and I think that's a different, which I like,
Mhm.
going between episodes to have a different approach, a different look. And obviously for us to be able to dive deeper into, I don't think we can dive too extremely deep into into his family life, into that kind of thing, but using that
Right.
as a catalyst, as a jumping point into us talking about
Yeah.
even personal testimony to family work life, success stories
Yep.
and failure stories and opportunities to be able to express those things and how we face them to create connection for those who may hear this
Yes, I
episode.
agree. I
um
agree. And honestly, we wouldn't even if we wanted to, we'd only be speculating anyway,
yes,
by
yes.
about somebody else's life, and it wouldn't actually have any real meaning or purpose
Productivity, yeah.
beyond beyond delivering perhaps maybe some opinionated entertainment, but
Yeah.
there'd be no meat to it.
Yeah, I'm not
But
Stephen
you're
A.
right.
Smith.
There's a
I'm
lot
not
of
gonna.
what's that?
I said I'm not Stephen A. Smith. I'm not gonna go into opinionated kind of.
Right,
You
right.
be Skip?
But
No,
yes,
just kidding.
yeah, right, right, right. But I do. But I like how you said that there was a lot of there's a lot of similarities between because I really started kind of looking at myself as like, what do I value most? You know I I get praised with accolades at church, for instance, and with family and friends and so on. Saying that I've got even going so far as thinking I have a photographic memory because I don't know if that's the case. That's not the point of my statement. But there's so many different venues that I have my hands in. There's so many irons in the fire. I've got I just finally finished my business plan for Noble Minded Press. We may be going back into a podcast. Hopefully, maybe in the next year, we're starting a student ministries at church. I'm the worship director at our church. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm still going to school. I'm about to finish that in February and then go into seminary to eventually get my PhD. And I've got all these ambitions and all these things in the fire. And I wonder, am I at the same risk of falling into the same judgment I'm now giving Tom Brady? Am I valuing myself for what I can do?
Hmm.
Am I identifying myself with what I can do? Or are these the stepping stones to fulfilling the commission, fulfilling the identity that I've been given by design?
Hmm.
Um, and so it is a good opportunity for me to kind of recollect, go into a self reflection box, and and then in a lot of ways, kind of reverse it and have empathy for those. I know, like you said, there's a
Yeah.
lot of men that are dealing with that. One of the reasons why YouTube is primarily watched by men, and you have people like Jordan Peterson being hailed and praised as a
Psychology.
savior of men of sorts
Oh,
of the
okay.
of the time, is because there's a great need. There's a huge need for men to be valued and not for what they do. So there's all this identity conversation, and so of the Gen Z generation, a good example of this because I'm about to start student ministries. There's an article that came out by Feed about the three main crises that Gen Z deals with these days, and the three main crises are mental health, sexual temptation, and the last one is interesting: identity. Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not an uncommon thing to have to struggle with, and I don't suspect that it's just limited to a specific demographic of an age group, but rather an era. So those in the Gen Z age group, but also those that are in the era of Gen Z are dealing with who am I? And it's a perennial question that needs to be resolved, and it's not so simple to resolve it with what you do.
Yeah.
And I think we do a great disservice when we do answer it in that way.
Yeah, well, and I would be one, serving in ministry for youth ministry for 10 years, that I came to a place where, nothing new under the sun, right? And so it just looks different. And so when we see these pieces, these top three things that you're talking about there with like Gen Z and such, is being able to look even at baby boomers and being able to identify how identity was still a top three thing for them. It was just based upon
Yeah.
the fact of what you do, versus now we're in a day and age of it's my feelings and where am I being directed and swayed and this, that, and the other thing. Whereas then it was, no, it's the hard fact, what you do, but it was still an
Yeah.
identity crisis. It was still a top three for them. And so that's one thing that, it gets, a lot of times they get a different look because they become so forefront verbally, but it was still an other thing, the quiet people, if you will, when they don't talk about those things, it still was a um I'm just gonna say that top three kind of thing that they no doubt
Yeah.
also dealt with. So that was one of the things that, we as a people, thinking in the mindset of the church, but also just in general, we always want to identify how we are different from the generations before us and the generations
Right.
after us, when in reality there are variations, but we're still the same. You know what I mean? Like, we're
Yes.
still humans, and we still struggle with the same things. It's just, how are we struggling with them, and what specifically are we struggling with within that general theme, within that general focus. So
Yes.
that topic of identity is a good example of that. 100%.
No, you're absolutely right. In fact, so when Ford came out with his Model T, right?
Mm,
And this is back in the early 1900s. Ford came out with his Model T, and he thought that the best way to produce that car was to have it all the same. It was, stencil driven. And then GM came out and says, no, no, no. What we need to do, we need to customize it to every person, because everybody has a different identity. And Ford's like, this is not going to work. It's not, just, it's about functionality. That's all it is. Just send out the Model T the way it's supposed to function. And GM decided, no, we're going to do paint colors. We're going to do different fenders. We're going to do what kind of seating do you want? And it was minor customization compared to
yeah.
what we have today, but it was enough to say I'm different. And GM, their sales soared, and Ford had to readjust his sales model so that he could customize his vehicles for the same reason. So you're right. Even from the 1900s, we had an identity issue, and before social media, your front lawn was your profile. Your front lawn. I told my in-laws the same thing a couple days ago. It's like, when you put out your front sign, I vote for Trump, or I vote for Biden, or I do this, or I do that. You're basically saying, here's who I am, and if you can accept that, you can come to the front door.
Hmm.
You know, and then we can have a conversation. And back then, it was a way of opening up conversation. There wasn't nearly as much, let's say, political polarity to have those kind of identification discussions. Today, on the other hand, if I post something on social media, this is who I am, you usually end up somewhere down in the chain of comments. It's like, this is my profile page. You can do what you want on your profile page, and they block them, or they kick them off the thread or whatnot. So conversation not to be had. But I think you're right. There's this who am I question is really perennial,
Hmm.
and in fact, I'm writing a book right now on the certainty of Christianity, and in the prologue I talk about this, actually pretty much in great detail. And Ford was an example I brought up in the book. And there we'd be hard pressed to find the United States, away from that idea. It'd be very difficult to try to separate identity, personal identity, from the American dream, or the American culture, the American identity, if you will. I don't
Hmm.
like using that word again, but so there's a cultural aspect within the United States to be individual. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of great benefits to being individual, but 4 years ago we had this question, and it happened in the church as well. This, which one's more important, personal identity and freedom, or personal responsibility?
Mm.
And I'm like, this is very interesting. This conversation about identity it's changing in such a way, so that, because back in when America was first started, when the United States was first founded, this was not a question. Your personal identity and freedom and responsibility came hand in hand. There was no juxtaposition. It's these are the same.
Hmm.
My personal responsibility it actually is the utterance. It's what informs, or rather, my identity informs my personal responsibility. And as a Christian, especially, I am in Christ, therefore I have a personal
Hmm.
responsibility toward my fellow man. So you're right. It's very interesting to see this. I didn't think about that until you said it, but it seems very interesting to me to see this question of identity not be just limited to our specific realm of experience.
Hmm.
Like, our parents dealt with it, our grandparents dealt with it,
Hmm.
and we still haven't solved the problem, at least from not to any measure of degree. So
Yeah.
I think we can do better.
Yeah, 100. I mean, 100%. What can't we do better in, right? But but I really think that, um it one of the things that has stuck out to me a lot lately has been, and actually I just, on my personal content, I had posted a bunch of different shorts out of a devotion I had shared one time on a stream, and I just shared the fifth part of it, the final part of it, and it was no, 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 the fourth part of five, and it talked about basically, like, my temptation is worse than yours. Like the idea of this braggadocious boastfulness
Yes.
in what I deal with when it comes to temptation and sin, specifically to that. And with this idea of identity, and I mean, insert topic here, because there has almost become like, no, you can't deal with that in a worse way than me. And we saw this politicized.
Exactly.
We saw this publicized between the baby boomers and millennials, heavy for almost a decade. This idea that no, we're the ones who are in charge, and you can't have this worse than we did. When I was in school, I was able to work a job and pay for college, and that whole kind of, that's really simplification of it, but that ideology, and then flip it over with the millennials, is no. Today I deal with this and I deal with this. Well, I mean, if y'all just
Right.
sat down and talked with each other instead of throwing fingers at each other, then you would be able to see what you each dealt with at the time. I mean, you think about the sexual revolution and the promiscuity and the different start of different things and the complete switch over in how things affected culture in that time as compared to what is normal now, and now you're looking at the economical side of things that is negatively affecting. Oh wait, maybe we both deal with difficulties that
Right.
influence the way we would make decisions and we would do
Yeah.
things and identify
No, that's
ourselves.
true. No, that's very true. So I watched in researching for the student ministries that were starting up anyway. I actually engaged that topic as well. And there were two episodes I watched. One from Dr. Phil, which I never watched, by the way.
I
But
am a
it was a
dirt
great
bag.
episode that yeah. It was a great episode because it took the baby boomers on one side of the aisle and Gen Z on the other side to actually talk about their differences and so on. And then there was another episode of oh, now I lost my train of thought. It was a Jubilee on YouTube. Jubilee does it's a great channel. They talk about usually the things that are controversial. So they brought one of the one I cried about the most was a conversation. They brought Palestinians and Israelis together to talk
Mm,
about the differences, and that I cried about that because at the end of the episode they all had a meal together. And if you understand the culture of that region, that is not heard of. You do not dine. It's one of the reasons why Paul says, "Don't even dine with somebody who calls himself a brother that doesn't follow through with
mhm,
being a Christian," right? Because dining to them is a very intimate, familial
mhm.
thing to do. Anyway, so that's
Yeah.
Jubilee.
Hmm.
There's the plug-in for
There
them, I
you go.
suppose. But they yeah, right. But there was an episode they did between again boomers and Gen Z, and there was a hashtag that was going around at the time that kind of instigated this conversation where Gen Z were doing hashtag OK Boomer, as if go back to your Facebook, go back to your MySpace, go back to your lawn posting. We have Instagram, we got TikTok. We're a different generation. But what you said really resonated because there's a lot of boomers that said, yeah, we dealt with this, we dealt with that, and you have you know eons worth of technology and benefits to your benefit, and yet you identify with your weaknesses, you identify with your brokenness. We had more brokenness, the boomers them saying this, we had more brokenness, but we didn't identify with that. We identified with our successes. We strived for success, and we didn't blame anybody else for our failures. We just didn't want to identify with our weaknesses, and so there seems to be a somewhat of a paradigm shift. Both sides agreed with that, by the way.
Mm,
Gen Z says, well, that's because you didn't have to deal with our side. And then when they defined what that was, they realized there was actually more similarities. But it had to do with the way they identified. One side identified with the problems of the world, but that hasn't changed. Like you said,
yeah,
there's nothing
no.
new under the sun. It had to do with how they decided to identify. Um, and I found that really interesting because there, I'm literally in the middle of both of these. I grew up in the millennial generation, where internet had first come out. And I put together my first PC when my dad took it apart. It was a Commodore 64. So I'm not Gen
Yes.
X. Yeah, he couldn't put it back together. So like I don't remember. I was like 10 years old. I had no idea what to do. I just saw, hey, it's a puzzle piece. This piece must go there, and it was really fun. And so I got into IT from that experience. But I was right in the middle of Gen X and Boomers and Gen Z. I was at the tail end of Gen X. So I watched as my generation was being called the age of information. Right at the click of a button, you can get information at high speeds, and you didn't have to worry about the truthfulness of it because generally speaking, it was pretty much true.
Yeah.
We were getting it quickly. We were learning how to use new technology. This generation is being called the age of misinformation because now you don't know what's true.
Yeah.
You know, 33% of the internet's used for porn, 10% is used for video games. I mean, a small, less than 10%, I think it was like the last statistic was like 7 to 8% of the internet's actually used for academic purposes, for truthful purposes. And it's so I'm looking at that and saying, well, Gen Z does actually have an issue that baby boomers didn't have because but it's not a different issue. It's rather that we're more aware of the issues today than they were then because they were dealing with their small experience, their small box, still just as problematic, still just as problematic, but it was their realm of experience and influence was so much smaller. Today we're seeing school shootings and we're seeing and granted that was all happening then as well, but now we're seeing more of it because it's broadcast in so many ways. You'll
Hmm.
see you know I don't know, a good 20 different reports on a school shooting from various different papers, when then they might read it once in a newspaper.
Hmm.
You know, it's not that it's different, it's just it's more mainstream now. And so you're seeing again that the problems of this world more mainstream and it is difficult for a Gen Z person or even somebody that's just growing up in this era to not identify with that.
Hmm.
And so it's I mean, I know that I guess the topic is identity now, but yeah, it's very difficult for somebody to not identify with their circumstances.
Yeah.
And I've been telling people at our church the same thing. It's like you can't do that. When you identify with your circumstances, it's just as problematic as identifying with what you do.
Hmm.
So in a lot of ways, you have to step back. Like I like how Jordan Peterson said this. If you don't know how to clean your room, you can't solve the world's problems. So step back for a minute, back up,
Yeah.
think about who you are, what you can do with the world. We've been watching Boy Meets World for again, millennial generation. We watched Boy Meets World. And there's a statement that Mr. Feeney said, and he says it's not enough to grow up so that you can be a success in this cold, cruel world, but rather that you grow up so that you can step into the cruel, cold world and make it better in some way.
Hmm.
You know, because otherwise you become a part of the cruel world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
I just spat out a bunch of stuff there, but
No, it's good stuff, and this is the fun part of doing like a behind the scenes kind of thing because this is just
right,
extra stuff that sometimes it's not direct to, and that's why it's something that's available to those who are looking to help support and also
right,
they want more of what else could be going on behind the scenes of just
right,
football conversations and such. So,
right,
some of the things
right.
I never shared this with you, I realized,
Sure.
and I wanted to share with you that I am filling this like I'm putting this together. This is kind of the picture of like the outline of what we're So I'll share this with you then after like it'll take me a day or two to make sure that I get it filled out. But
Okay.
so kind of a focal questions, focal talking points, stuff like that. I'm just taking some
Sure.
notes here on some important stuff, just so you can see that I'll be sharing what's the intention then based upon the topics that we come across, etc. Because coming into today, um, my whole expectation of our conversation was like, okay, I think we're going to be heading towards the kind of that family slash work life balance, which still obviously will be a part of conversation, but maybe
Yeah,
we need to spend a little bit more time about identity when it comes
I
to
think so.
because I'm trying to think about the people who will mostly listen to this, and most
Mhm.
of them will probably be 15 to not sorry not 15 that probably 18 to 35-year-old,
Mhm.
and some of them either may be dads or looking to be dads
Yeah.
or husbands or those who are working full time, so people who are fans of football, but then also they may deal with that falsehood. I wrote it here as falsehood of identifying with situation, or
Yes.
falsehood of identifying with what you do.
Circumstance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so with that, I think
That's good.
that's a really good direction for us to look at. And um, and so in looking through this, the way I've been setting up, and it doesn't always have to be the same. And in fact, I had a plan for the previous official episode that I just recorded. Should be either releasing, not sure yet, either tomorrow or next Tuesday. But um, with that, I had a plan of how we were going to approach it out of, looking at the current Panthers and looking at the current NFC South and looking at stuff like that. And it just ended up, we just jumped into deeper conversations. So, about the topic at hand. So who knows? But usually the idea is to create that introduction, if you will, out of
Yeah.
like who you are. Like, you're a fan of Tom Brady. What have you been seeing of his play? What have you been thinking about the current Bucks? What are you thinking about the NFC
Yes.
South?
Oh,
Those
and
kind of things.
I do
And
have a
then
lot of opinions on that.
okay, perfect, perfect. Because
Yeah.
then from there, the idea, if you picture with me, I mean, one day I hope to actually have a couch right here. So
Ooh,
it's Cleats Off the
nice.
Couch, and we
Yeah,
can have conversations from the couch. If I can even have some live guests and stuff. Anyway, that's the
that's
dream.
great.
Um, but the idea being, you're sitting on the couch with a buddy, the game's on, you're talking about football, or you saw the games, you're talking about football, and then from there, where does the conversation go? And
Right.
natural conversations that start from football that you would have with a friend. That's kind of
Yep.
the idea. And so with that, starting with the conversation about what are you seeing out of Brady? I know you're a Brady fan. Maybe even connecting it back to the Patriots, current Bucks.
Yeah.
Somewhere with those kind of things, and then from there, leading into that, and many times it naturally just starts to do this, which is the whole idea, into
Right.
what you're seeing with Brady, what you're seeing with the work life thing, what you were saying about the divorce, and when he started to prioritize certain things, et cetera, et cetera. And that then can lead into our conversation here about family work life
Yeah.
balance, and what we see a lot of that as a problem of, and just focus then on the identity in. And then we can
Yeah.
speak from even our own situation. It might be good for us to think on some stories from our own lives about where we have seen um,
Easy.
success and failure. So the place of when we properly identified and realized that we had to give up, we had to sacrifice, we had to do something here for the sake of what was truly important with our
Mhm.
family. Other times there are stories of where we know that there's a sacrifice that had to be given, respectfully, into of our family, to work and be able for us to do something financially. It
Mhm.
can work either way, but then also failure stories, we got all of them. But
Oh yeah.
but being able to focus on some of that, and then through that conversation, however it may lead, to be able to kind of bookend and come back to, kind of closing out with, connecting back into football, connecting back into, okay, so talking about this, I know, we've talked about a lot of great things, that kind of stuff. I'm not going
Yes.
to end it like that. That's really terrible. But being able to put it back in and be like, okay, so, knowing that these may be some of the things, that we've dealt with, that he no doubt is dealing with. What do you see moving forward the rest of 22? Where do you see the Bucks? So one of the things I did
Right.
before these guest episodes was I did predictions. I did season
Okay.
predictions for the season. No, season predictions for the season, go figure. I did predictions for each team, and so everybody's already heard, anybody who's listening to this
Okay.
has already heard me. And so the nice thing about having different fans of different teams coming in is to give perspective from, of what they think is going to happen moving forward from where we are. And so by the time we record this is going to be in 2 Mondays, and so it'll be, what is that, the 29th, I think, November 29th.
Yeah.
And so at that point, we'll already be, because we just went through
10.
week 10, right? Tonight's the final game of week 10.
Tonight's the final. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tonight's the
Okay.
final game for
So
the 10.
week 11. So we'll be on the final day of week 12. So we'll be
Right.
past halfway. So it'll be kind of, so that's how I'll bookend that, is then being able to look at
Okay.
that and being able to kind of close that out about like what you see, what you think, any final thoughts, kind of stuff like that. And
Okay.
and so right now what I have is the family work life balance, making connection to personal
Yes.
stories, successes, failures, identity conversation, the falsehood of identifying with your situation and circumstance or what you do.
Yeah.
Um and
Well, this
what was
tags right into the gospel. It's incredible.
yeah. Yeah. So like I said, if it happens, it happens. I'm
I
not
I
I'm
know.
not one to be like, "No, God,
I'm
I'm
not
not
trying.
telling them about you."
Right. I'm not trying not to avoid it
Yeah.
because I think that it's really important, and I
Mhm.
would not be doing our due diligence
Mhm.
to if we did try to escape it. But it's so amazing when you realize, like, even David dealt with the same perennial question of who am I,
Mhm.
and he asked the question is who am I, Lord, that the Lord of all the earth should look down upon me. You made us lower than the angels. And it's this whole. I mean, this whole
Yeah.
psalm that he laments about is like, I am unworthy to be looked upon, and then at the very end of it he laments in a joyous occasion saying, I am found in you. And
Mhm.
it's so even David
Yeah.
is like, what, 4,000, 6,000 years ago. So, and he identifies it with the promise and the person of Christ that we now know existed, what, 200, 2,000 years after him. So
Mhm.
it's, you can't get around that. It's like, because when you ask the question, who am I? You're going to end up with an existential question, an
Yeah.
existential reality, which goes beyond football, which goes beyond your work life situation,
Yes.
which goes beyond even your family, it goes beyond, you know. So the two most important things Tom Brady said was football and family. It even goes beyond that.
Mhm.
And so I think, not predicting the future of the team at the moment, but predicting the future of his life, he's going to have to come to a real knowledge of who he is. Um, because he's going to fail eventually at football. He's going to age. He's not going to, you know, he's not going to make it.
Mhm.
No one does. No one can, because there's, disregard TB12. He may be the healthiest ox there, but he's still, at some point, age is going to catch up with him. His life's going to catch up with him, and he's going to have that same question he's going to have to deal with. Better that he deals with it now than he deals with it later, because it's going to damage his life. It's going to damage his family relationships. It's going to, we, as men, we have to figure that out.
Mhm.
As human beings, we got to figure that out. But especially as men, we got to figure that out, because you got to know that your life is worth more, far more than what you can do. Far, it's not built. It's not based on what you do, and it's not based on your circumstances, how good or how bad they might be. You know, they're, and that begs the question. Then what is it based on?
Mhm.
And I would challenge thinkers to not ask that question of what is it based on, but who is it based on? Because it's not based on you. There's nothing you could do to be good. Anything you could do to be
Mhm.
bad. I mean, nothing you can do to be, as far as your identity, be bad. You are innately a flawed human being. When you take the existential crisis of who you are, you end up saying, I'm worthless. I'm a bag of water and dust, a conglomerate of nothing. You know, so what do you do with that?
Yeah.
What do you do with that? You either live out your life in trying to deny that truth, and claiming that you have this hubris of success, and eventually you'll fall, like Tom Brady probably will later on,
Mhm.
or you end up agreeing with it and you fall into depression. So you either go through despair or denial. But that's what's so great
Mhm.
about the gospel, though. It splits the whole thing and says, no, it's right in the middle. It's like, no, you're not good. He was good for you. No, you're not worthy, but he is, and he's made you worthy. So that way, when you go up to, and you see you're seated you stand before him in the judgment seat. It's, God doesn't say, oh, you're worthless. You're nothing but dirty rags. It's like, no, but I've got the righteousness of Christ. And so instead of seeing you, he sees his son.
Mhm.
So and it changes everything. So now football is much more. It has more meaning now. It's like, it's just a game, yeah, on the field, but it has more meaning to it. And if you only take it based on its surface understanding of it, then it's millions of dollars, and it's team caps, and it's who's ran the longest yards, and you get distracted by the things that won't last. They're shadows, you know.
Oh, my dominance in fantasy football will last. Don't you lie. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
I've been
think.
playing fantasy football too, by the way, this year.
What was that?
I've been playing fantasy football this year
Oh,
too.
okay.
I'm first in my league. It's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm being facetious there.
You
I
got Josh
think.
Allen?
I think. What was that?
Do you have Josh Allen?
No.
That's
No.
why.
Listen, my issue was, and if some of this conversation comes up too, that's a known
Mhm.
part is some fantasy talk. But um,
Yeah, yeah.
I drafted I went the running back route because we have a PPR league, and
Okay.
you get like 0.25 points per carry. So if you
Ooh,
have a
wow.
heavy volume running back, yeah. So
Interesting.
Javante Williams, I went Najee Harris, I went Cam Akers, and two of those three are not playing. One is injured for the
Right.
season, and the other, whatever happened in Los Angeles, and the other one has underperformed big time because we have a horrendous OC in Pittsburgh. But anyway, so my first three picks, and when that happens, you're done
Yeah.
for. And so and I got Scary Terry out of Washington, and as a
Okay.
receiver, and he's just been eh. And then I had Hunter Renfro out of Las Vegas, and that whole situation has been just,
Yeah, I had him for the first week. I had to get rid of him.
oh my
Yep.
lord, yeah. So it's
I
just
got I got Kittle. Yeah, I got Kittle. Remember last year I played with you, and I
Yeah,
had Stephon Diggs. I gave him another chance this year for good reason.
yeah,
I got Barkley. So yeah,
yeah,
I hear what you're saying.
yeah.
I think I'm only winning because there are three guys that are on the team that have no idea what to do. They've never optimized. They've never they've never traded. So I've got a guy this week, for instance, the Patriots weren't playing. They're on bye week, and he got the Patriots for defense. And he's like, "Well, what do I do?" I was like, "Well, you have to switch him out with another defense." Like, "Well, how do I do that?" I was like, "Oh no."
Ha!
So he lost just by default.
Yeah. Yeah, I took a risk with Cincy's defense, and fantasy football wise, they've done a good job. And I made out well with the recent TJ Hawkinson tight end trade to the Vikings.
Nice.
But that's literally the only positives of my team. So we'll see. Right now I think I'm like 3-6 or something like that. It's
I got
just
more than that.
not,
I got Kyle Pitts. I've got Kamara. Yeah, I
man.
got some pretty decent. I got a decent team. Josh
Uh
Allen's my quarterback.
I'm sorry, I'm 4-5. I shouldn't denigrate myself too much, but um, it's really and I'm 11th. That we have. Well, the other thing that makes this difficult is it's an 18-man league, and so
Oh,
we have 18 people. It's from our church. We've been doing it. This is the 8th season, I think it is. And so we have 18 people. So next year we're splitting it into two. So we have an A and B league, and then the winner of each of those will be almost like the AFC NFC champions. And then the co-commission he and I then will look at what players on each of those winners' teams, what points they get in that final week, and announce who the
yeah.
winner is of the ultimate thing. So that way you have access to more players. Because right now, man, we had 18 people each. I'm hearing sirens go mad.
Yeah. I hear him on your end too.
Well, that's not good. And they're
Is
coming
it in
right by
your?
my house. Okay, they're going way out to the woods. Uh-oh.
Can't be good.
So Lord protect all involved. Um
Right.
so I have it's moments like that make you think like, well, and I'm sitting here talking about fantasy football. Anyway,
Right.
and
Exactly.
somebody's going to put their life on the line. Anyway.
As if to redirect our focus again back to what we were talking
Yeah,
about, right?
yeah. But
As if to illustrate our point.
but yeah, so it's been an interesting season. That's for sure. It's been difficult, and I'm 11th right now, and I'm set
Yeah.
to lose this week. I'm pretty much set. Oh, wait a minute. I have a chance. Wait, are you kidding me? He
It's on
completely
tonight.
he completely underperformed. I have one player left. I have Terry McLaurin tonight against Philadelphia, but I'm down by just under 25 points. So
Yeah,
if he scores
I
me
underperformed this one too.
if he scores two touchdowns, I mean, which he hasn't done, he has two touchdowns on the season. If he scores two touchdowns to date and he has like 8 catches for 100+ yards, then I win. But he hasn't had he oh yeah. Anyway,
That's a
uh,
slim chance.
I don't get my hopes up. But
Hey, so I've got my brother-in-law and my nephew that are in our fantasy football league.
okay.
And I need you to solve a problem for us.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah. So they've been complaining that they're the last of our league.
okay.
And they said, well, we've traded, we've optimized, and we're still last in the league. And the three guys I told you about, right? The three guys that have done
Mhm.
nothing, and yet they're not the last in the league. So they came back complaining to me saying that it's all based on chance. I've argued with them, telling them that no, it's mathematics and probability, but no, they're still saying it's chance. Can you correct them for me?
I will say it's kind of like playing Skippo or something, where there's a way in which that you purposely set things up, right? And I suck at Skippo. It's not a good example, but my wife is owns at that game. But um oh my goodness.
We're going again?
Yeah, I'm gonna glance outside real quick. I want to see if it's something
Yeah.
right near me. I'm just seeing because there's an elementary school right down the road. I'm seeing if no, they're going past it. Okay. Because
Oh,
that would be there goes an ambulance from 2 towns over, a tanker truck. On top of, I already heard the fire truck from the local volunteer fire department. So there must be something big, going on out way out that way.
wow.
Man. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't
Should be
the
earlier.
school, with the elementary school
No,
there.
I get it.
Um, so kind of lost my train of thought on where I was headed because I was gonna follow the direction and lead back
It's okay.
into conversation out of fantasy football. But oh, I was gonna say earlier that I think you really have four choices on that who you identify with. That you were
Mhm.
talking about. I mean, obviously the nobody, nothing, and you have to deal with the consequences there, right? You have the myself. I am the one in charge of me. I am the ultimately, and you have to deal with the consequences there, right?
Yeah,
You have others. I identify myself in who I am according to others and how they shape me and how they
yeah,
speak of me and stuff. And then you have a higher power option, and that one obviously has that obviously has A or B in the in
yeah,
the way in the way of the consequences that come from of which you choose of which you claim, because obviously
yeah.
if you choose the idea of Buddhism, you have an effect that comes out of that. If you choose the idea of Christian faith, you have the effects out of that. So that was something I had thought earlier. I didn't want to
No, no,
interrupt
I
your
agree
your
with you.
conversation.
And I thought about that as well, and I agree with what you're saying. But I dug deeper with those categories because you're right. You can identify with other things, and then you can identify with yourself. But the effects was more interesting to me. So the
Mhm.
effects are they're pretty consistent no matter which category you decide to choose, whether it's yourself or others or a god. The effects are still the same because either you go the way of pride or despair. In the
Mhm.
case of a Christian, you'll go to pride, saying God has chosen me. I've seen many pastors do that. On the other side, you go the exact opposite direction. It's like I'm unworthy, and that's a good place to start, but not the place to remain. Um, if you choose others, my friends are my power. You've seen this before, like in Kingdom Hearts, if you play games. My friends are my power, and that again, pride.
Mhm.
Or my friends are my power, and I don't have any. Okay, well now it's despair.
Mhm.
In the case of yourself, well, it's myself, and I am worthy. I'm good. I'm a success. I've got plenty of money. I've got a great wife. Me, pride, me, and I'm just not a good person, and I can't do anything right. And again, despair. The effects are consistent though. So while there are many different categories, the effects are what's more important. And either way you look at it, it's still a form of pride. You're either
Mhm.
thinking highly of yourself or you're thinking down of yourself. And the whole point is it's never been about you to begin with.
Mhm.
And if you can get outside of that paradigm of thinking of self, no matter what category you decide to identify self with, if you can get outside of that, there's a true freedom, that where pride is not the answer and despair is just the beginning of something greater.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, I think
I thought
in
about that.
in our conversation, I think being able to even touch on some like specific, being able to almost like systematically lay out like these four things and stuff like that. The reason
Yeah,
why I brought that up is I think that
good
that
idea.
bring that brings a good that brings a good conversation point out of that family work life balance identity
Yeah,
conversation to identify, so that way anyone listening can be able to, oh no, that one's me. And then from that, being able to emphasize those
that's a good
connectors
idea.
like you're saying with the pride versus the despair.
Yeah,
And
that's a
that
good idea.
that
I'll write that down.
allows that the connection, oh wait, that sounds like me. And then the, oh wait, I'm on the side of pride with that, or I'm on the side of despair. And then that presents the opportunity of hope, which we can share the gospel in.
Yeah, that's very good. I like that. That's good.
So
Yeah, and so my weakness, I'll admit, is I kind of get lost in my own thoughts a little bit, and this is something I've been working on, but I'm nowhere near good at it. So I will need some direction to take. Hey, you're going too deep, too fast. Slow down. Let's discuss this
mhm.
because I connect the dots so quickly from point A to point B that I lose. And I've seen this so many times. I've taught classes. I lose my students because I'm more focused on the topic than I am the audience.
I gotcha. Yeah,
So
well
if
that's
you
my
can slow me down, go ahead and do so.
that's my aim. My goal is to be that guy.
Yes,
Is
thank
to be
thank
the
you.
one. Now, I will say sometimes some of the audio issues do get in the way of, like, if I try to butt in the middle of what you're saying, it can create kind of a kerfuffle of sound. I just wanted to use that word, um, but
I'll do the
with
same.
that, there might need to be something where I give some sort of like visual cue to you about like even just holding a finger or something to be able to say like I want to interject or something like that. So we can do that. I have to be careful because sometimes though you've seen me this whole time. I have the little cha cha and Italian, mix in me. So, but I'm the
I'm
whitest.
Italian too, so
Well, it's funny because I've got all this movement. I said the cha cha thing, the movement around in the hands and stuff, but I'm the whitest slice of bread. And yeah. It's
making a salad in midair.
oh my goodness, a Cuban. No, anyway, so so yeah, I think that'll be a really good thing for specifically giving meat and grab rather than leaving necessarily. Sometimes I feel like even with my own conversation I leave it such. I do this in football too, where I've really worked to try and bring down to directly speak to a specific technique, a specific um I'll just stick with that. And instead of just a general idea of, if we want to run a power play, it's because we see this guy set up here and we want to be able to go through the B gap, or something like that. Well, for a high schooler, you need to understand, well, if we see him lined up there, guard, I need you to kick with your upfield shoulder so that way you turn him out and our fullback can follow through to go up and that gives the deeper piece there that is more specific that, oh, I'm a guard. I identify with understanding exactly what he just said there because that's me. I need to do that. And so being able to lay out those kind of identifiers, if you will,
Yeah,
could be an easier way for somebody to actually come away with meaningful thought, if that makes sense, rather than just,
yeah.
I know they said something good, but I don't really know where to think of it. You know what I mean? So, um, so I'm gonna jot that down too. Is kind of like the four. I mean, would you agree that the
Yeah,
four I
I
listed
agree.
would probably be the good?
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
what to
So
rate them as.
yeah. So there's a tier structure, and they,
Four
they do this in
who's?
psychology as well. The four who's, yeah. So
Yeah,
it's you personally, your family or friends, depending on which one they follow through, your society, and then your deity, if depending on if you have a deity. It doesn't have to be a deity, a
yeah.
philosophy, a religion of some sort. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I've heard that before.
and let me see. Well, here the first one we'll do is nothing. Nothing.
Well,
Would you?
it betrays though, because I mean, you probably need to talk about it either way because there may be some people that think they identify with nothing, but that truly doesn't exist.
Okay. Yeah. What were self, social, deity, and
No. It's not social. So family and friends. It's intimate relationships. So it's self, family and friends, or others if you want. Society, or so this is where you're identifying with a more of a globalist idea of I'm part of the human race, right?
mm,
Or I'm part of my nationality, or whatever the case may be. And the last one is deity, philosophy, something like that. It's something more esoteric or metaphysical.
gotcha. I was trying to be,
But you're right.
I was trying to
No,
do
that
the
does exist. You're right. It does
alliteration. I,
exist.
I was trying to do the alliteration, which is why I was like, okay, so self and social, and then societal, and then supreme. Like that's what I was trying to do.
That
But
works. Yeah, I like that. That's good. The four S's. I like that.
um,
You wouldn't be
so
wrong.
but we can. I'll rate it as 5 because we can do we can touch on that nothing just for the sake of that. Some
Okay.
people might identify in the fact that, well, I don't believe I'm anybody's. I'm not my own, but I'm also nobody decides for me because there's nothing greater than what we see today. I mean, I don't know if we
Then
actually, when I say that out loud, I don't know if we actually want to do that because that might take us too philosophical. It might take
you
us
don't have
too.
to, because you can shut it down immediately by applying the claim to itself. Really, what you did was you defined yourself by yourself, and so there's no nothing. You just you fell into that first category of self.
Mhm. So
You,
we
you're trying to deny that, but you have to steal from a worldview you don't agree with to affirm that.
so we can start with nothing as one and literally in a sentence roll that into how one doesn't
Done.
exist. Here's number two. Two is
Yes.
number one. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So nothing, self. I just as a joke, I'm gonna put in parentheses. I've got to social being others who are
I like
relational
that.
stuff like that. Societal, and supreme. Now I want
I like
pizza.
that.
Uh, I'm hungry for pizza now. Dee-dee.
Ooh, that sounds good.
And randomly
Dude.
funny side personal story. This is just a funny little thing. My wife and I and our son, I think was it yesterday, was it just yesterday, yeah, so yesterday they both took a nap. So I was on here, I was playing Tomb Raider or something. I hadn't played a first player game in a while, story game. So I was like, let's get it. I wasn't tired for a nap myself, so that was very restful for me, was to get on a game a little. And well, she tried to scare me when she came down, but they came down when they were both woke up, went out to play. I shut things down and stuff, and went out to join them. And we were talking, and I had budget papers and stuff on the table that we were kind of chatting about, as you know, as he's playing, throwing a football and running around and stuff in the living room. And he turns at one point, because she mentions about, what do we want for dinner, and I said, do you want to just have leftovers? And he just turns and looks at me and says, Mommy wants pizza. And she looks at me, she's like, I don't know where he just got that from. I have not said that, but now I want pizza. We had leftovers because I was like, we're not buying pizza. Anyway, so,
Right.
but it's the most, toddlers. Anyway,
Oh
so,
yeah.
so that was just hysterical, because it's just like, pull a random idea. We had a trip home one time. We were almost home, and he randomly starts talking about how he wants to go swimming in somebody's pool. But we can't go swimming. It was nighttime. We didn't even know who he was talking about. We didn't,
Right.
like, what do you mean you want to go swimming in somebody's, and he was having a full meltdown that he could not go swimming. And it was the most bizarre.
Wow.
It was the most bizarre, like, Bud, what are you talking about? But anyway, it's toddlers, man. Anyway, so I just thought the pizza thing, and that's my ADHD. It's one thing to the next. Supreme pizza, supreme
No,
deity
hey,
to supreme pizza. There you go.
yeah, this weekend was interesting too. So I had to go get COVID tested on Tuesday, so I can get on site to the place I work, and we
Oh.
saw a veteran. We saw a homeless veteran that was standing on a median. And this is a great story. A homeless veteran was standing on the median, and I feel, as a prior military serviceman, I feel compelled to kind of go and speak to these people, because he had a veterans card, so it was an official veterans card,
Mm.
and I feel compelled to go talk to them, because either they're doing stolen valor, which is a crime,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Or there really are vets and they need help for real. And so I pulled over and we had a great conversation. It turns out it's all checked out. He was an 11 Bravo infantry, and he got displaced during Hurricane Ian.
Mm.
Him and his wife. And so they traveled up to Maine because his wife has some back issues that Maine medical abilities have a greater capacity to be able to handle than Florida does. Especially since Florida doctors they've went to can't agree on what it is.
Mm.
But they went. This is the really discouraging. They went to 6 different churches. They're Catholics, by the way. They went to 6 different churches in Florida. They were living in Fort Myers, and 6 different churches, and they all of them rejected them. All of them turned them away. Says we can't help you out. So they moved up to Maine because they had a friend that should have been able to help them out, but they said we don't have the room for you. Can't help you out. Their social services, a longer story that they're being rejected from shelters for a different reason. That's their story as to why. But I did a background check to see if their story actually checked out, and it turns out it really does. Everything they said was true, and so we brought them to our church this past Sunday, right? So I held them up in a hotel for a couple of days, and then brought them to church, and immediately we were talking about identity, right? How you don't identify with your circumstances or the things you do, but I'll tag on to that saying the things you do and your circumstances are evidences of who you are,
Mm-hmm.
right? And even the Bible says the same thing. Faith without works is dead. And so I was really, really impressed with my home church, because the moment they came in, they were immediately crowded around with love and pragmatic help. He was offered a job by the end of the service. They were offered a place to stay with people that we know, family that we know, because unfortunately, with our circumstance, we couldn't take them in as much as we normally do. We normally do this, but we have a legal contract with somebody that we're for our property. That's another story. But I was really, really impressed with the actions that my church took. It was like I was really proud to be a part of this church, because that's something that I've been wailing on the Christian church a lot in since I became a Christian and became an apologist. It frustrates me that we either go to intellectual assents about the faith, or we go to humanitarian efforts without the gospel. It's like I loved the fact that that my church took both in very seriously, and then showed that they take it seriously through helping these people. And we do this regularly. I was just really impressed yesterday doing that. So
that's awesome. Man,
that's
what
awesome.
always sucks too, especially after dealing online for 3 years now and different Christians you meet across the internet. is what's really sad is you can usually make a solid prediction about what church is doing which end of that spectrum just based upon what correlation they have on the Wesleyan Calvinistic spectrum. And that is sad.
Right.
That is sad.
That is
Uh
very sad.
Technically, I mean, because normally if you go more reformed, they're all I'll give you money
Intellectual.
and intellectual, or if they're on the Wesleyan side of things, Arminian side of things, it's more of like I'm gonna be there beside you doing it, but there's no coordination with the gospel. There's no correlation with the true
Right.
good news. It's just about how can I help give you water? How can I help? Which in itself is not a bad thing on either side, but left alone, it is very bad and very dangerous.
Yeah, well, it's not the gospel. It's not
Yeah,
what saves, and
yeah,
so they take on a humanity. They're no better than any other humanitarian effort.
yeah,
It's like you might as
yeah.
well be, you know, well, Salvation Army is different because that actually does do the gospel. But you might as well be any one of the 501c3 nonprofit
Mhm.
organizations that are not Christians. It's not specifically identified with Christ.
And the other side,
You're,
you're no better off than a small place of higher education.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. It's like without Christ, you become you can. I like how you said that. You become a cerebral institution, or you become a humanitarian effort, and neither one of them are specifically Christian. It doesn't save anybody just because you know enough or you do enough. Again, that's not your identity.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, very good,
Yeah,
very good.
and that's actually connecting back to a previous conversation I had with somebody, with this the first guest episode I had. It came up in the conversation when we talked about what drew you into faith, what drew into things, and he shared a little bit about his past, and he had been a part of a youth group that went and served in different ways and different capacities on different trips, and he got to
Uh,
experience different conversations and stuff with people about that perspective of like, I can't believe that anybody would actually do this for me and this, that, and the other thing. And that led into an opportunity for me to be able to actually able to make a statement about that specific thing in the way that about how that is a great entry tool. It's a great thing that opens up opportunity, but we as Christians have to follow through. Like
yeah,
Jesus examples for us is, I'm going to provide healing, but I'm going to follow through with go and sin no more. Like, follow me and I'll make you a fisher of men. I am the way, the truth, and the life, not
yeah,
your insulin is the way, the truth, and the life. No, that's not how this works, so
yeah,
um
yeah. And the gospel does not stop when they say yes to Jesus.
yeah,
Like it's a
it
lifestyle. I like
starts.
how one of our
That
teachers saying,
starts.
yeah, yeah, right, exactly. Missions and discipleship is not an option as a Christian. It's literally part of your identity.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I agree with you. We end up saying, we kind of end up turning Christianity on. If you are in the middle, if you're not humanitarian or just intellectual, but you really are trying, there's still a sort of blocker that a lot of Christian churches end up doing. Where great, it's all about the gospel, and then they go making Jesus into a sort of a Christian fan club of sorts. It's like we got you in the membership. Now let me teach you how to get more members. It's like, wait, are we an MLM? Is this multi-level marketing? Are we
Mm.
just advertising memberships here? What is part of that? What are we supposed to be doing? What are we getting out of this? And so it becomes a decisionism sort of thing. Like not that I'm a Calvinist, but Paul Washer is a good example of this, saying that we end up turning the gospel into a decisionism setting, and you got to go further. It's discipleship. It's a lifestyle, and it should give utterance. It should inform your actions. So missions become a part of your identity as much as part of your actions.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a fun
It's
thing
good.
that's that's recently on the mind too, and I know we probably need to finish up here shortly.
Yeah, yeah.
But I said this may not take a whole hour and a half, but this is you and I. But
Okay.
so Steph, keep us on a leash. But uh, so last night, talking a little bit of budget stuff, and I was putting before my wife, I'd come across a paper that we had written down financial goals and stuff like back in 2017 or something. And so visiting some of those, giggling about some of them, that kind of stuff is like, oh my goodness, like, oh, I mean, and then also like, wow, we achieved these, and also looking at what that was our goal, and then also looking at, okay, well, let's do this again. Because we hadn't done that in a while, and we've been talking a lot about like, let's look for things that we set as like we want a goal, we want to aim for with our money, because it's one thing, we don't want to go consistently feeling like, oh, we're just making it through, we're just surviving through, because you don't have purpose with your finances then.
Right.
Anyway, so writing down stuff and sharing some of them, and she had shared with me of how she would really like to do every year, at least one, if not two, but at least one, like I called it a family fun getaway, in the way, not like a vacation, but in the way of like a weekend, down at Inner Harbor in Baltimore, to go to take him to the aquarium and to go do that kind of stuff, or to go and we could take a short trip down to like the Creation Museum and Ark Encounter, and like stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I said, I'm writing down these ideas, and writing down more ideas out of those and such, alongside of vacation ideas for the future, because 5 years we want to go on a vacation, possibly 10-year anniversary trip, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
And um and I turned to her and I was just like, I feel like it's really important for me to say this. And I said to her, I really think, especially, we were really stuck on the Ark Encounter Creation Museum trip idea, and about where we're located. The way that we can travel, we can go visit friends in a certain place in Ohio. Like, we can go across Western Pennsylvania, visit northeastern Ohio, and the route takes you down through Columbus and Cincinnati before you get to where you're going, which is just north of Lexington, Kentucky.
City.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I was just like, there's so much that we can do there. And there's another route that takes you through Pittsburgh, or beside Pittsburgh. And so I was just like, you can do a roundabout here kind of thing. And I was just like, there's so much that we could do. This might be more than just a weekend getaway idea. This is more of the vacation and how we're going to make this an actual thing. Because it's an 8.5 hour drive just to
Yeah.
get to there from where we are to the Ark Encounter and such.
Uh-huh.
And so the idea was looking at how could we do more with that? How could we actually, make something of a travel, especially when you have a kid, and potentially 5 years from now, potentially a second kid and stuff. So, um, so with that, we were talking through all these pieces. And so that's what I'm thinking through as I'm writing this down, is like, where could we go? What could we do with this kind of stuff? That's just what I do. I get too far into detail when we're trying to focus on the overall. And and I turned to her and I was just like, I'll be honest with you, going through places like this, I just feel like this idea of us doing yearly trips and stuff is a great thing. It's a great goal. It's a great thing for us to be able to do as a family, to create memories, to grow, and just to love life together. But at the same time, I really feel like when we do a trip like this, we really need to make an emphasis on having at least a portion of the time that we're on any trip be that of service in some way. And so that idea of how can we, that trip example, how can we in our trip stop in Pittsburgh and serve at a local homeless kitchen or something like that? Like, just so,
Yeah.
just along that lines. And it's not about pragmatic moralism or anything like that, but out of
Right.
that, like, I want my son, just obviously that's very close vision. I don't know what the future holds, but I want my son to experience the fun of these trips, and for us as parents, I had talked with her about, we want to look at these opportunities for how can we be engaging in education as well as in discipleship for him as
Mhm.
he's growing, but also, like, I want him to see that, like, this is not the norm. One, it should never be the norm,
Yep.
of this is all we do. We just spend money and go do fun things. We do great things. Yeah, that's like, we want to enjoy the finances that we've been stewarding. We also want to enjoy the opportunities around us that we have in America. But on top of that, we want to take hold of the opportunity of what it looks like to be the hands and feet of Christ. And I said to her, and we would have to think through, because I don't want everything to be, oh, we're gonna go serve at a food kitchen. That's not the idea. But even down the line, challenging opportunity to visit a local park in a city and go out of our way to look to interact with random strangers to
Yeah.
share the gospel. Like stuff like
Yep.
that we're gonna be freaking uncomfortable, but we know that it's all in the name of, one, the kingdom, and two, the further discipleship and growth of our child, so that he can
Yeah.
grow into something that you and I never had, that we know is what we as children growing up into a disciple of Christ should be doing, should experience, and therefore should be trained already by the time they graduate out to be able to go and do themselves with no qualms or concerns. And so,
Yeah.
anyway, so that was, I mean, we were just talking about the disconnect of just humanitarian service and just knowledge and stuff, and I've struggled in my life on both ends of that, to where I've had times of where I've had just, I just love conversation and love thinking deeper. I love, but I don't do anything with it, you know. And then I've had other times where like a lot of my spiritual formation is that of going and serving, is going and being the hands and the feet. But many of those times I didn't follow up with actually like looking for and following that up with conversations of the gospel and stuff. I relied on
Right.
others to do that, or it wasn't even a thought. And so trying to look at, okay, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I am pretty intellectual. I do comprehend things. I do like to mull deeply over things, and I would say I'm a wise fool in the way that I know when to keep my mouth shut a lot of the times and seem wise, and know times to speak. But I also know how to put my own foot in my mouth. So
Right.
it's a happy life I live. But on the other end, I have a lot of knowledge and experience of little things when it comes to actually going and providing, like going and working on stuff, going and doing stuff. And I also have experience now in the leadership of those things, and the ways, the knowledge of finding out how to be able to place people in who know that stuff in those positions, since I can't do it
Yeah.
myself. And so I have all these pieces. How do I help my son to be able to engage knowing those things, but also applying those things? And so I spend way too much time in my weeks overthinking different stuff about how I want to engage the discipleship of my son. And I feel bad because
Right.
what the way in which I have things when it comes to work, and when it comes to, you know, teaching, substitute teaching, and it comes to coaching, and it comes to content work, and as well as part time in the week when it comes to, you know, Tuesdays and Thursdays right now, through football season it was, and we just lost second round of playoffs, so things will be reset here. But um I'm with my son full time on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So those are specific times that I'm emphasizing and have a plan for how I want to be approaching things, how I want to just be repeating things throughout the day, different scriptures and attributes of God, and yada yada yada.
Mhm.
And maybe I shouldn't say yada yada after talking about the attributes of God, but uh, but anyway, and so my what I have going on within my week is completely different than my wife, who has the she has the 8:30 to 5 o'clock. She
Right.
has a set schedule, and then, you know, so that affects things. So when I have plans for this and stuff, even when I look to include her and stuff, she's either tired, or she may not grasp the same thing that I am processing mentally.
Yeah.
And it definitely becomes it becomes a difficulty for us, because I want her to be involved, and I don't want her to feel left out, because she's his mother and she wants to be his mother and she wants to be my wife, you know? So I don't want her to be left out. And so anyway, so talking through some of these things, it's just like I dwell on them all week, because I'm nonstop thinking,
Right.
processing. I'm a visionary, she's a realist, and so sometimes a pessimist. I'm a visionary who try I'm tend to be a hopeful optimist, you know, even when, I mean, that actually, great example was the football season this year. I just got drained, so drained, because I would come home every night, every week, just completely stressed out, and
Yeah.
just completely frustrated, because we have an idiot of a head coach who doesn't know how to call offensive plays. But I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm not going to dwell on it. I just want to
Obviously.
I just, you know, and it's been something that the last couple weeks I've definitely had to verbally be giving the glory to God about what I have not attributed, what I have contributed to the team this year, and what the guys and the positions that I have contributed were able to accomplish. And
Mhm.
it was very obvious that I was starting to take a little bit of pride. I was starting to take that route, because, you know, our defense was top 3 in the area consistently. I was basically passing game coordinator, assistant defensive coordinator. We had 22 or more interceptions on the season, in 12 games. We had
Nice.
25 or more forced fumbles in the game, 17 recovered. We averaged a score a game by our defense, you know, 7 or 8 points a game, where our offense averaged the same. Anyway, so to see that, and then to see idiocy on the other side of the ball, it's really difficult. It's really difficult. And I don't think I'm the smartest in the world, but just the other night I was definitely looking at potential openings at different college programs and stuff, because I started to have a conversation with my wife about with how much I enjoy what I've been doing on my side of the ball, and imagining what it would be like to work with people who aren't complete idiots, like who actually know football and know what they're doing. It's kind of intriguing, the idea of coaching at a collegiate level, interacting with college students, etc. But anyway, that's I went way off the
Yeah,
rail there. I said I wasn't going to
it's
dwell on
okay.
it, and here I am. See, this is one of those personal things that I really have to be taking to the Lord right now.
Right, right.
But
Actually, so based on what you said, there was something that kind of resonated and kind of clicked out. But your son, you're talking about how to disciple your son in such a way, and that really hit home as well, because we want to show our kids what it's like to actually live the
mm,
gospel, live it out, and we struggled with that when we first got married as well. There were two things that really helped out with that. Number one was classical education. So my wife homeschools our kids, right?
mhm,
And so we do it within the paradigm of classical education. And so when you said as an example, I was like, well, I'm a wise fool. Well, Socrates almost literally said the same thing. I know that I know nothing.
mhm,
Essentially, is what he said. And so we take the classical education method that was originally, I think, ancient Greece, and we apply it there. So you go through a grammar phase, a logic phase, and a
mhm,
rhetoric phase. The grammar phase is where we fill you with information. You don't need to know why. You're too young to understand the abstract concepts. Just here it is. They get to a certain age where they're starting to ask the why question. This is usually where parents become more afraid. It's like, oh no, they're asking why, and I don't know why. So
yeah,
how do I answer this? Parents sometimes just forget, or otherwise. And so this is where they learn the why to what they already know. So there's a lot of repetition, but now they're knowing the why. And then the rhetoric phase is where you send them off, and they're able to do within the comfort and safety of your own home, test out the what and the why they've learned, and they may come up with new whats and whys that don't necessarily contradict the base principles that we've already given. So classical education really helped us with that. The other thing, and it's far more important, I think, is that they're never going to learn what you say
if
as
you're
much as
not
they
doing
learn
it.
what you do.
Mhm,
And so in our church, it's one of the things that so my wife handles the children's ministry and I'm handling the youth, right? And one of the things we're very keen about, and we have pushed as much as we can. And there's been churches we've been a part of that didn't want to go this direction, but it to the detriment of themselves, I think, because um, most of those churches are maintaining or they're falling. Um, and we've been to what, 10 different churches, so give or take. So one of the things we've pushed though is you need to have the children in the church. You need to have them in the church during worship. If at all possible, have them in the church during the sermon. Well, they're not going to understand the sermon. That's not the point. They're not there to learn what the pastor's telling them. Think about the early church. They didn't separate families into groups. They didn't
mhm,
separate children to say, all right, now it's time for children's ministry. Go ahead and leave your parents to some person that we've hired to take care of kids. Well, that's a millennial way of thinking. It's like, well, we have a father that works outside the home, a mom that works outside the home. What do we do with our kids? I know, daycare. Let's find a babysitter who's, by the way, not training your child in any way. Let's send them off to school, and now you're not responsible for training your kids. Now the school is, and we know what kind of disaster that has brought. So, in a lot of ways, you have to combat a lot of that by being your child's representation,
mhm.
being their example. And so, to close out the thought about the homeless vet that we talked about this past weekend, my children got to witness something they've never witnessed before.
Mhm.
Like they witnessed, we talked about the gospel, and we go almost on a monthly basis to inner cities and so on, and we preach the gospel and we help them out. We give them clothes and so on. And they see it a lot, but they've never actually seen the impact that we were able to make this past weekend, because it's just never been able to. It's never resonated. Most people are looking for handouts. They're looking for, they may get the gospel and they get some counseling, but never anything like this. So they're really seeing how deep you can really go. Last night, I sent, because the house they're about to get into, they're prepping for, and so I was able to hold them up in the hotel for another 2 days while this other house is prepping. This family in the church is prepping their home to take them in. So I said, we'll hold you up in the hotel for 2 more days while they prep. And I was as I was about to pull out, they said, hey, can we leave a bag with you? Because and can we pick it up? I don't know when we'll see you again. It's like, and I looked at the guys like, we know where you live, and
Mm.
that realization hit him so hard. It was meant to be just a half-hearted joke. It's like, dude, relax. We know where you live, but that was a real wow, you're right. I have a place to live now. And he just broke down.
Mm.
It was such a wow. You know, like I was wrenched. I was like, I didn't realize what I had said because it's a haphazard comment we always make. I know where you live. You know, I'll get you later. You know, but for him it was like, you do. And it was just our kids get to see that, and and they're literally going to see that because their grandparents are who's taking these people in because that's their ministry, uh, and so they're going to see this regularly. We didn't teach them anything. We didn't tell
Mhm.
them what the Bible says. We didn't tell them what God has said. We never told them what we believed. They saw it in action, and
Mhm.
it's going to resonate with them. My wife told me a story very similar, and I'm not going to tell you the story, but she saw this in her life. I saw this in my life. No one taught us how to do this. No one taught us that. No one showed us in the Bible where it says to do this. We watched our parents do this. We watched our friends, people that we admired, do this, and we figured, let's emulate it. We saw the impact. We saw the goodness that came out of it. Let's do it. And so we did it. And for the last 12 years we've been married, we've taken at least three other people in our home um, that were better off for it. And we would have taken in this other couple, like I said, for other reasons we can't. But so they've seen this regularly. So I challenge any thought that says that you have to teach your child anything through words.
Mhm.
Your example is going to be far more instructive than what you could ever tell
Mhm.
them.
And the most powerful thing is showing it through example, but then following up with teaching through your words.
Yes, yes, I agree with that. I'm
Yeah.
not saying the words are
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
irrelevant.
No, I just for
I
the
agree with
case
what you're
of
saying. Yes,
closing the thought, I think that that's the
I
ultimate
agree.
goal, and that's where it's important for us to do our due diligence in scripture study and understanding what the word teaches, because then we can identify because through discernment of the Holy Spirit, and we can teach then. Like Jesus, right? Go and do, and then come back. Let's debrief. I'm gonna give you the understanding. That kind of thing.
Yes,
Um,
I agree.
so yeah, I mean, I think we've got plenty of material to be
Plenty
able
of
to go
content.
on, and plenty
Yeah,
more plenty more material than we're gonna actually need to use for our conversation. But
that's
we'll
okay.
definitely, just to revisit through that, we'll definitely approach looking at, giving you an opportunity to introduce maybe your connection into Tom Brady, into football, the fandom in which you follow, why you follow it, which again, yours is different, so it gives that opportunity. And I'm sure some people will coordinate with that, because anytime you have a great player, you have people who are fans just of that player. My family's a great example of that. My mom was, and my biological father, I said we grew up in a Miami Dolphins household. Well, it's because they were Dan Marino fans.
Oh yes.
And
Yeah.
so I had I had my biological father, who to this day, to my knowledge, is still a Miami Dolphins fan, because he was actually in it for football. And he loved Dan Marino as well. My mom stopped after Dan Marino retired. She made things awkward at times, talking about Dan Marino and his white pants in the rain, but she just stopped though with football after he retired. And so that was a similar thing of like, oh, I was only in it because that quarterback, like entrance with my then husband and yada yada yada. So, but um give you that opportunity to talk about a little bit football, Bucks, Pats, and Tom now, and yada yada yada, and then allow that. I'm gonna write out and try and process through how I want to write some questions with this.
Okay.
It might be next week that I get this to you. So I mean, you still have a week.
Sure. Oh
But
yeah.
with how I'm processing through some of the other ones that because I have an episode recording this Friday. So I want to make sure that I get that one focused on and taken care of first. But and then talking through some of the stuff I'm not going to go through all of them, but the family, work life, identity, the who's, the
Yeah.
specifically thinking through as a husband, for anyone listening, for those who are husbands, for those who are dads, and those who are just men who are workers, men who are committed to their work life, because we know a lot of men are um, slaves to work, and so with that, being able to then think through how can we connect this conversation, the identity conversation, the whose we are, and the application of power and control over of how we
Mhm.
approach things, um, to that demographic, I think is where the main demographic is going to be. I say that work one too, because I think there will still be young adult men in there.
Yeah, there
Mainly
will.
men, mainly men. I like, obviously I'm all about if ladies want to listen, but this is a topic that mainly is men
Football.
conversing about. Women might there are a group of women that love to watch football, no doubt about it. But I have seen far less women go out of their way to listen to podcast episodes and to look into stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
we men are fickle. Um so yeah, and then we'll end that together about in some way being able to kind of close out conversation, connecting back into with even
I think
possibly clausing with understanding that these are conversation these are topics that we're looking at that are intended for us to converse about, for us to think about, so we can understand where we stand as our own man, and from
yeah.
there be able to make decisions to how we approach. And so we in no way speak for Tom Brady and what he has,
No.
but it does bring us back for he's probably dealing with some of these, just like no doubt some of you listeners are. We are, as on a daily basis. And so looking forward though here through the end of the season, let's talk about the Bucks again, where that I might do kind of a bookend in that style to then take us back to. I've thought about trying to come up with some sort of fun prediction game kind of thing, but I might not. I don't know. I'm not really that kind of. I'm not a game show guy, um, but then closing out with predictions into the end of the year, what we think moving forward, how we think, specific to Tom, how we think things are going to look for him. And do you think because of this decision, are we going to see him continue to play into 2023, 2024? Do we think with his 10-year contract, he's in broadcasting, do you think he's going to be stepping out soon, et cetera, et cetera? We can have those kind of closing remarks and
Yeah.
conversations. And then I'll obviously input one or two things as well for, what's the word? Things like tags about like the Patreon and maybe a sponsor in
Yep.
there somewhere. Um,
Sounds good.
but yeah, so that's kind of the plan.
Sounds good.
I enjoy
I'm excited.
conversation with you every opportunity I get, man. Um, I
You
even to the
too, man.
even to the point of afterwards sitting chewing the cud on the thoughts a little bit, and to the point of like, oh, I think I could use a nap now. Because it's a lot of thought and I enjoy it. I enjoy being mentally stimulated. So, um,
I had a personality test given to me back 4 years ago about it was for a work thing. It was so called Culture Index, and they had a measuring table called the EU energy units, right? And so the average human being has about 30. It's there whatever the ambiguous number was, but it's about 33 per person, which means, in translated, most people need at least 15 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes of a break per hour, right? Mine was 62. They're like the highest they'd seen at the time from that I was talking with them was 64. They're like based on so the guy he's been doing this for years. He translated what my personality test says. Based on what I'm reading here, it sounds like that you're probably staying awake until 1 o'clock in the morning, researching something existential or philosophical. I was like, I literally was doing that the previous night that he was talking about. Yep, that's true.
that's
So I get
funny.
it. So not everybody can take the full length, the full breadth of that kind of thought. But I'll spend all day doing this, and I'll be energetic. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm the kind of person who I remember having conversations when I was in college with certain guys, or I used to do a lot of what did I call it, or what was it called, mind mapping. It's called mind
Mind
mapping.
mapping.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. And I used to joke about how the ultimate office for me was having a door next to me that I could open up, walk in, close, and then you're literally surrounded by just whiteboard, and then you can just go all over. But
Yeah.
I remember having like at one time a 3 hour session with him where we just literally talked, spewed ideas and thoughts and stuff, and just filled a college whiteboard. And after those 3 hours, we both were just like, loved it, great time, ready to go eat and take a nap. So I do enjoy those conversations, but I don't think I'd be a 62. I might maybe in the low 50s. That'd be my
Sure.
projection. But my
Sure.
wife would be like a 10. So
He's
she's
always taking naps.
she's an introvert who is she has extroverted tendencies, but if it's not required of her to use those extroverted tendencies, then she leans into her introvertedness. So
That's interesting. Yeah, my wife is extroverted. She has to process externally. I have to process internally. So I'm actually an introvert, comfortable in external environments. But but in an external environment, I'm likely to lose my energy because I'd rather be in my office alone, researching, studying, and
Mm,
all cerebral, But my wife, on the other hand, she's very social, but she's not comfortable in social situations, which is
mm.
very interesting. So she's an extrovert by behavior, but in the midst of a crowd, she's more likely to be internal and closed off a little bit. You have to really get something out of her. But once you get her started, she does not shut up. It's
Yeah, I haven't thought more about where I would stand and stuff like. I mean, I'm usually an extrovert of extroverts in the way of, I talk a lot. I like to make things awkward at times. That's, I mean, that's from a youth pastor point of view, but um, in the midst of a crowd, I'm good. I like to have a mic. Like I like to be conversing and communication, and I usually get energized when I'm with people, talking with people. It's one of the reasons why I love streaming so much. And is because out of all the like, I enjoy content, but out of all the forms of content, I love live streaming because it's literally, it's second to real life people walking in, saying hi, talking with you in person. It's right there next to that. You know what I mean? And I absolutely love it. And so if I, when I can be interacting with people, just talking and hanging out and stuff, that's my jam. And
yes,
but I absolutely love, and this might be from some of my Quaker background. I absolutely love the sit in meditation and simplicity and quiet. And so I appreciate those kind of things. I can be more reserved in those ways. So, but a lot of those I've been trained in. I've been taught, and I've appreciative on both ends. Outgoingness as well as being able to close off and dwell. So I
yeah.
need to do.
Personalities are not pigeonholing. They're more of a
Yes.
bell curve anyway.
Yeah.
Not,
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah. It's just everything has to have a title, and you've got to be able to, you know, uh identify within those two kind of things or three kind of things, and that's, yeah. I
Yeah, because again, personality tests also cannot tell you who you are.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They just give you, it's just like spiritual gift tests, right? The idea is to give you
Right.
direction to help you potentially identify, and that's why I only like the ones that allow that give you, like, look into these three, not the ones that say this is the one. Because I can't
Right.
stand that. I can't stand that. Anyway, that's a different conversation. But
Yeah, I
anyway,
hate that.
it's 11:20, man.
Yes.
We could keep talking, but I know I don't want to take up any more of your work time, as well as I'll have to do some editing and stuff. But I don't want to go do an editing. I'd rather just sit and talk. But um,
It's okay.
but anyway, let me know if you have any questions about anything prior to that. I do want to say a happy Thanksgiving to you and your family, as it'll be after
Thank you.
Thanksgiving that we do meet again and actually have that. And I'll send you a message, connect with you at some point in the next week or so, with these notes. Is there an email that would be best suited for you? Actually, if you could just type it to me, just send it to me here in the Discord.
Yeah.
Then what I can do is I can just copy and paste and just share it with you right there in an email. About these are kind of the questions, talking points, direction that we had talked about, so you have them for your own use.
Yep.
And two other things I will need from you is a headshot, a pic, in the way of bio. You know what I mean? Being able to give kind of like, hey, here's an upcoming guest kind of thing. And so a picture that you'd be good with, and a short little bio. So like 2 sentences or something about you. So just normal stuff. If you were going to a speaking engagement, or if you were doing something like
Yeah.
that, what would that be? So those two things I need from you. Um,
Sure. Yeah, I still do
so
speaking engagements anyway, so I've got stuff already prepared.
perfect. So between those three things, that's really all I ask of you. And before we hang up, I'd love for us to take a minute to pray over what's to come of
Yeah.
this, and then be on our way. Um,
All right.
so any last words? Any last words? Yeah,
No, I
because that sounds so good.
it was good to know you. See you
Yeah,
up in heaven.
yeah, yeah. I mean, to die is
No,
gain,
no,
right? No.
I do. Right. No, last words. I do appreciate what you're doing with the show, and I like the fact that there's a way to connect that's not so spiritually minded that there's no earthly good. But I also like that there's room for that spiritual talk, things that will outlast the earthly things that we like to talk about. So I pray for you guys. Hopefully, you and your wife maintain this. I could think you could actually make something of this and
Mm.
reach a lot of people that desperately need to hear the truth of things, and to be refocused. So I appreciate what you're doing.
All glory to God.
All glory to God.
Yeah. So, if you don't mind, I know you don't.
Yep.
Let's pray for a minute and see you on your way. Father God, thank you, Lord, for who you are, and Lord, for the opportunities that you give us in life. Opportunities like this to be able to connect with brothers, sisters, those who also know who you are, Lord, and who can come together in looking for opportunities to be able to speak of the truth of your name, to all that need to hear it. Father, I lift up this episode before you, lift up this podcast, surrendering it to you and entrusting it to your hands. Father, what we do, what we talk about, pray for your direction, Holy Spirit, that you would give us the words that are needed to be said. Lord, that you would open hearts and minds to receive what it is that you would want them to hear. Father, I pray for lives to be affected, not by anything I have to say, but everything you want to say.
Hmm.
Thank you for Aaron and for his willingness of time, and his willingness as well, Lord, for his life to be used, that you would be seen, that you would be heard, that you would be known. Father, pray for these next 2 weeks, Lord, for the times that we each have with our families, that you would be honored in the memories that are created, in the learning opportunities that come as husbands and dads, and for, Lord, the opportunities to example who you are to our families, to our friends,
Hmm.
and Lord, that we would grow in the midst of that as
Hmm.
well, that you would build us up in mind and in heart, that we would grow to be better honorers of you through each and everything we do.
Hmm.
Thank you, Lord.
Yes, Lord.
Amen.
Amen.
I get to that point in prayer sometimes where I feel like I want to keep talking, just like in conversation, but then I get that spiritual slap that's just like, "Shut up, you're done." You know what I mean?
Keep it simple.
Like
Yeah.
you're just gonna repeat yourself. Just stop.
Because
Um,
God's like saying, I already know what you're going to ask. You don't have to just keep going about it. I just realize, God, you know what I want. Just give it. Take,
oh man,
your will be
that
done.
that brings up a whole other conversation that we don't have time for today, which is
No, we don't.
is modern worship actually just incantation? Anyway, so let's
Yes, it is. We'll move on.
you as a worship
Not my
guy,
worship.
yeah, yeah,
Not my
you
worship.
you as a
We're
worship
very
guy.
intentional about it. But
Oh,
yes.
that's been a thing that my wife and I have had lots of conversations about, and I've actually had to come to a place of personal practice when it comes to being in a place of where somebody wants to repeat the same thing 8 times, where I actually stop singing and I begin to focus and go into prayer and focus in on even sometimes just exaltation of who God is out of that. You know what I mean? God, you're a good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. Um, but then actually dwelling, forget the song. I'm gonna dwell, God, in how you have been a good father in my life, in
Exactly.
who you are as a father, for me, for my family. How, Lord, that I would emulate that I would, and so like I've had to try and practice this, and it's difficult because I have a little bit of music background, not a lot, but I have a little bit of music background. I have a little bit of even sound tech background and stuff like that. And so there's different pieces that it's hard to shut the brain off from in order to just let your heart actually worship. And it's also hard not to then dwell upon those things of which is this actually a healthy thing? Are there others here who are being led a certain way to understand certain things because of how this is being done? But
Right.
but again, then check your heart, entrust that to the Lord. That's not on you. That's
Yeah.
not that's not for you.
Don't,
Um,
don't let don't let the artist. I'm telling a friend right now. I was like, do not let the artist. So he agrees with me. Look, Bethel Church, Hillsong United, Elevation Worship. You got to be watching out Carrie Job. You got to be watching out for some of these worship leaders that are either affiliated with or actually themselves teaching a false gospel. I was like, I get that, but why are you using songs that are biblical, by the way, that they may have written, right?
Mhm.
Why are you using that song as a way of using also the writer as a mediator between you and God during worship? Like, for instance, good example, Gary Job. We sang a song this past weekend. It was Heal Our Land, which is a title that betrays the actual meaning of the lyrics. If you listen to it, it's we long for no more divisions in the church. Lord, heal, new power, new wine as divisions fall. Right. Um, Spirit of God, breathe on your church. Pour out your presence. Speak through your word. We pray that in every nation Christ be known. Our hope and salvation is Christ alone. I'm like, this is not heal our land in such a political aspect. This is we want the real stuff because political division is not for the church, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we did that song and things like that. He's like, you did a Carrie Job song. It's like, so why were you singing the song thinking of Carrie Job? Is the words true? Are the words true?
Yeah.
Right? Is Carrie Job your mediator when you bring this stuff, or are you actually singing these words as if they were your own? Right? So yeah, there's a lot of songs you need to. There's great theologians.
Mhm.
One of the songs I absolutely hate, and it was written by a prominent gospel preaching theologian. It's He lives, Christ Jesus lives today. He walks with me and talks with me along life's narrow way. He lives, he
Is that
lives.
Charles Wesley? Is that who
No,
did that?
no, no.
No,
This
no.
is this. I forget the guy's name, but
Okay.
off the top of my head, I know because I should know this. But it was early 1800s. He says, "Salvation to impart. You ask me how I know He lives. He lives within my heart." It's like that's the best evidence you got. That is not evidence. That's in fact the Bible says something completely against that. He never said, "Ask me into your heart." That's so again. But he was when you read the story, he did the story. He did the song because he was fed up with so many different people questioning the resurrection.
Mm.
So he wrote the song as a rebuttal to that. So it wasn't even worship,
Mm.
right? So great theologian, great guy. But so in other words, you can get a good gospel centric preacher to write a bad theological song. You
Mhm.
can also get a bad theological preacher preaching even a false gospel to write a good song.
Mhm.
Don't judge the song based on the writer. That's called genetic fallacy.
God's the one who's in charge of it.
He's the
Yeah.
author,
So
precisely.
he'll
Anyway,
use bad to create good. Anyway. So
precisely. I'm being called back at work, so
all right.
I gotta do that.
Oh well, you go suffer, and
Yeah,
no,
right.
I'm just kidding. You have a great and blessed day, man. And again, happy
You
Thanksgiving to
too.
you guys. Have a good time with family, and I will see you again soon.
Thank you.
See ya.
Pleasure. Bye.